Hello, and welcome back to Baby Elias's Stories. We now return to Night Watch by Terry Pratchett, Part 4. Vimes woke up and stared at the ceiling. There was a deep rumbling somewhere nearby. Treadmill, watermill. It was going to be a corny line, but some things you had to know. "Where am I?" he said, and then added, "This time?" "Well done," said a voice somewhere behind him. "Consciousness to sarcasm in 5 seconds. The room was large by the feel of the air, and the play of light on the walls suggested there were candles alight behind Vimes. The voice said, "I'd like you to think of me as a friend." "A friend? Why?" said Vimes. There was a smell of cigarette smoke in the air. "Everyone ought to have a friend," said the voice. "Ah, I see you've noticed you're still handcuffed." The voice said this because in one movement Vimes had swung himself off the table and plunged forward. Vimes woke up and stared at the ceiling. There was a deep rumbling somewhere nearby. Treadmill, watermill. Then his thoughts knotted themselves most unpleasantly. "What?" he said. "Just happened." "I thought you might like to try that again, lad," said the invisible friend. "We have little tricks here, as you will learn. Just sit up. I know you've been through a lot, but we don't have time for messing about. This is sooner than I'd like, but I thought I'd better get you out of there before it went really runny." "Mr. Vimes." Vimes froze. "Who are you?" he said. "It's Lu-Z, officially, Mr. Vimes. But you can call me Sweeper, since we're friends." Vimes sat up carefully and looked around. The shadowy walls were covered with writing. It must be writing, he thought, but the Hubland type of writing which is only one step away from being little pictures. The candle was standing on a saucer. Some way behind it, just visible in the shadows, were 2 cylinders, each as wide as a man and twice as long, set in massive horizontal bearings, one above the other. Both were turning slowly, and both gave the impression of being a lot bigger than their mere dimensions suggested. Their rumble filled the room. There was a strange violet haze around them. 2 yellow-robed figures tended the cylinders, but Vimes's eye was drawn to the skinny little bald man sitting on an upturned crate by the candle. He was smoking a foul roll-up of the sort favoured by Nobby, and looked like a foreign monk. In fact, he looked exactly the kind Vimes occasionally saw with begging bowls in the street. "You're looking fit, Mr. Vimes," said Sweeper. "You were in the watch house, right?" said Vimes. "Snouty called you lousy." "Yes, Mr. Vimes. Lu-Z. I've been sweeping up there every night for the past 10 days. All for 2 pence, and all the kicks I can't dodge. Just waiting for you." "And you told Rosie Palm where I'd gone, too. You were the monk on the bridge." "Right again. Couldn't be sure she'd catch up." "How do you know who I am?" "Don't get excited, Mr. Vimes," said Sweeper calmly. "I'm here to help you, Your Grace. And I'm your friend. Because right now I'm the only person in the world who will probably believe anything you tell me about, thunderstorms and falls, that sort of thing. At least, he added, the only sane person. He watched Vimes as the man sat quite still for half a minute. Good, Mr. Vimes, said Sweeper. Thinking. I like that in a man. This is magic, right? Said Vimes at last. Something like that, yes, said Sweeper. For instance, just now we moved you back in time, just a few seconds, just so you wouldn't do anything you'd regret. Can't say I blame you for wanting to have a go at someone after all you've been through, but we don't want any harm to come to you, do we? Ha! I almost had my hands round your throat. Sweeper smiled. It was a disarming little smile. Smoke? He said. He fumbled in his robe and produced a ragged, hand-rolled cigarette. Thanks, but I've got my own. Vimes began automatically. His hand stopped halfway to his pocket. Oh, yes, said Sweeper. The silver cigar case. Sybil gave it to you as a wedding present, right? Shame about that. I want to go home, said Vimes. It came out as a whisper. He hadn't been sleeping in the past 12 hours, merely recovering. This time it was Sweeper who sat in silence, apart from the rumble of the cylinders. You're a policeman, Mr. Vimes, he said eventually. Well, I'd like you to believe for a while that I'm a sort of policeman too, all right? Me and my colleagues, we see that things happen or don't happen. Don't ask questions right now. Just nod. Vimes shrugged instead. Good. And let's say on our patrol we found you, as it might be in a metaphorical kind of way, lying in the gutter on a Saturday night, singing a rude song about wheelbarrows. I don't know a rude song about wheelbarrows, Sweeper sighed. Hedgehogs? Custard? One-string fiddles? It really doesn't matter. Now, we've found you a long way from where you should be, and we'd like to get you home. But it's not as easy as you might think. I've gone back in time, haven't I? It was that bloody library. Everyone knows the magic in there makes strange things happen. Well, yes, it was mainly that, yes. It's more true to say that you, got caught up in a major event. Can anyone get me back? Can you get me back? Well, said Sweeper, looking awkward. Wizards can if you can't, said Vimes. I'll go back and see them in the morning. Oh, you will you? I'd like to be there when you do. These ain't the wizards under decent old Ridcully, you know. You'll be lucky if they only laugh at you. Anyway, even if they wanted to be helpful, they'd hit the same problem. And what's that? It can't be done. Not yet. For the first time in the conversation, Sweeper looked ill at ease. The big problem I'm facing, Mr. Vimes, is that I ought to tell you a few things that I'm not, in any circumstances, allowed to tell you. But you're a man who isn't happy until he knows the facts. I respect that. So, if I tell you everything, can you spare me, 20 minutes of your time? It could save your life. All right, said Vimes. But what? You've got a bargain, said Sweeper. Roll 'em, boys! The noise of the big cylinders changed for a moment, and Vimes felt a very slight shock, a suggestion that his whole body had just gone plib. Plib. The phrase whole body just gone plib likely refers to a feeling of numbness, tingling, or weakness, possibly accompanied by paleness in the skin. Plib. The noise of the big cylinders changed for a moment, and Vimes felt a very slight shock, a suggestion that his whole body had just gone plib. 20 minutes, said Sweeper. I'll answer every question, and then, Mr. Vimes, we'll send you back from 20 minutes in the future to now, and you'll tell yourself what you and me agree you ought to know, which will be most of it, really. You're a man who can keep secrets, okay? Yes, but, Vimes began. The tone of the spinning cylinders changed slightly. Sam Vimes saw himself standing in the middle of the room. That's me! Yeah, right, said Sweeper. Now listen to the man. Hello, Sam, said the other Vimes, staring not quite at him. I can't see you, but they say you can see me. Remember the smell of lilac? You thought about those who died. And then you told Willykins to hose down that kid. And, hey, you've got a pain in your chest. You're a bit worried about. You've got a pain in your chest you're a bit worried about, but you haven't told anyone. That's about enough, I think. You know I'm you. Now, there's some things I can't tell you. I can know them because I'm in a... The speaker stopped and looked away as if he was taking instruction from someone off stage. A closed loop. You could say I'm 20 minutes of your life you don't recall. Remember when you had a sensation that his whole body had just gone plib? Sweeper stood up. I hate to do this, he said, but we're in the temple and we can pretty much dampen out the paradoxes. On your feet, Mr. Vimes. I'm going to tell you everything. You just said you couldn't. Sweeper smiled. Need any help with those handcuffs? What? These old capstick mark ones? No, just give me a nail in a couple of minutes. How come I'm in a temple? I brought you here. You carried me? No, you walked with me. Blindfolded, of course. And then when you were here, I gave you a little drink. I don't remember that. Of course not. That was the purpose of the drink. Not very mystical, but it does the job. We don't want you coming back here, now do we? This place is supposed to be a secret. You messed up my memory. Now you see here. Vimes half stood, but Sweeper held up his hand placatingly. Don't worry, don't worry. It just made you forget a few minutes, he said. How many minutes? Just a few. And it had herbs in it. Good for you. Herbs. And then we let you sleep. Don't worry, no one is after us. They'll never know you've gone. See this thing here? Sweeper picked up an open work box that lay beside his chair. It had straps like a knapsack, and Vimes could just see a cylinder inside the box. This is called a procrastinator, said the monk, and it's a tiny version of the ones over there, the ones that look like your granny's mangle. I'm not going to get technical, but when it's spinning, it moves time around you. Do you understand what I just said? No! All right, it's a magic box. Happier? Go on, said Vimes grimly. You wore one of these when I led you here from the watch house. Because you were wearing it, you were, shall we say, outside time. And after we've had this little talk, I'll take you back to the watch house, and the old captain won't know any different. No time is passing in the outside world while we're in the temple. The procrastinators take care of that. Like I said, they move time around. Actually, what's really happening is that they are moving us back in time at the same time that time moves us forward. We've got others around the place, good for keeping food fresh. What else can I tell you? Yeah. It helps keep track if you just think of things happening one after another. Believe me. This is like a dream, said Vimes. There was a clink as the handcuffs sprang open. Yes, it is, isn't it? Said Sweeper calmly. And can your magic box take me home? Move me in time all the way to where I ought to be. This? Ha! No, this is strictly for small-scale stuff. Look, Mr. Sweeper, I've spent the last day fighting a right bastard on a roof and getting beaten up twice and sewn up once and, stitched up too. I've got the impression I should be thanking you for something, but I'm damned if I know what it is. What I want is straight answers, mister. I'm the commander of the watch in this city. Don't you mean will be? Said Sweeper. No! You told me it helps if I think of things happening one after another. Well, my yesterday, I was commander of the watch and I bloody well still am the commander of the watch. I don't care what anyone else thinks. They are not in possession of all the facts. Hold on to that thought, said Sweeper, standing up. All right, Commander. You want some facts? Let's take a walk in the garden, shall we? Can you get me home? Not yet. It's my professional opinion that you're here for a reason. A reason? I fell through the bloody dome! That helped, yes. Calm down, Mr. Vimes. It's all been a great strain, I can see. Sweeper led the way out of the hall. There was a big office outside. A hubbub of quiet but purposeful activity. Here and there, among the worn and scratched desks, there were more cylinders like the ones Vimes had seen in the other chamber. Some of them were turning slowly. Very busy, our Ankh-Morpork section, said Sweeper. We had to buy the shops on either side. He picked up a scroll from a basket by one desk, glanced at the contents, and tossed it back with a sigh. And everyone's overworked, he added. We're here at all hours, and when we say all hours, we know what we're talking about. But what is it you do? Said Vimes. We see that things happen. Don't things happen anyway? Depends on what things you want. We're the monks of history, Mr. Vimes. We see that it happens. I've never heard of you, and I know this city like the back of my hand, said Vimes. Right. And how often do you really look at the back of your hand, Mr. Vimes? We're in Clay Lane, to stop you wondering. What? Those loony monks in the funny foreign building between the pawnbrokers and the shonky shop? The ones who go dancing round the street banging drums and shouting. Well done, Mr. Vimes. It's funny how secretly you can move when you're a loony monk, dancing through the streets, banging a drum. When I was a kid, most of my clothes came from the shonky shop in Clay Lane, said Vimes. Everyone we knew got their clothes from the shonky shop. Used to be run by a foreign guy with a funny name. Brother Soonshine Sun, said Sweeper. Not a hugely enlightened operative, but a genius when it comes to pricing fourth-hand schmutter. Shirts so worn you could see daylight through 'em, and trousers as shiny as glass, said Vimes. And by the end of the week, half the stuff was in the pawn shop. That's right, said Sweeper. You'd pawn your clothes in the pawn shop, but you'd never buy clothes from the pawn shop, 'cause there were standards, right? Vimes nodded. When you got right down to the bottom of the ladder, the rungs were very close together, and, oh my, weren't the women careful about them. In their own way, they were as haughty as any duchess. You might not have much, but you could have standards. Clothes might be cheap and old, but at least they could be scrubbed. There might be nothing behind the front door worth stealing. There might be nothing behind the front door worth stealing, but at least the doorstep could be clean enough to eat your dinner off, if you could have afforded dinner. And no one ever bought their clothes from the pawn shop. You'd hit bottom when you did that. No, you bought them from Mr. Sun at the shonky shop, and you never asked where he got them from. I went off to my first proper job in a suit from the shonky shop, he said. Seems like centuries ago now. No, said Sweeper. It was only last week. Silence ballooned. The only sound was the purr of the cylinders dotted around the room. Then Sweeper added, It must have occurred to you? Why? I've spent most of the time here being beaten up or unconscious or trying to get home. You mean I'm out there somewhere? Oh, yes. In fact, last night you saved the day for your squad by aiming a crossbow at a dangerous miscreant who was attacking your sergeant. The silence ballooned larger this time. It seemed to fill the universe. Eventually, Vimes said, No, that's not right. That never happened. I would have remembered that. And I can remember a lot about my first weeks in the job. Interesting, isn't it? Said Sweeper. But is it not written? There's a lot goes on we don't get told, Mr. Vimes. You need a short spell in the garden of inner city tranquility. It was indeed a garden, like a lot of other gardens you got in areas such as Clay Lane. The grey soil was nothing more than old brick dust, elderly cat mess and generalized semi-rotted dross. At the far end was a 3-hole privy. It was built handily by the gate to the back lane, so the night soil men didn't have far to go. But this one had a small stone cylinder turning gently beside it, and the gate was barred shut. The garden didn't get much proper light. Gardens like this never did. You got second-hand light once the richer folk in the taller buildings had finished with it. Some people kept pigeons or rabbits or pigs on their plots, or planted against all experience a few vegetables. But it'd take magic beans to reach the real sunlight in gardens like this. Nevertheless, someone had made an effort. Most of the spare ground had been covered with gravel of different sizes, and this had been carefully raked into swirls and curves. Here and there, apparently with great thought, some individual larger stones had been positioned. Vimes stared at the garden of rocks, desperate for anything to occupy his attention. He could see what the designer had in mind, he thought, but the effect had been spoiled. This was the big city after all. Garbage got everywhere. The main disposal method was throwing it over a wall. Sooner or later, someone would sell it on or possibly eat it. A young monk was carefully raking the gravel. He gave a respectful bow as Sweeper approached. The old man sat down on a stone bench. "Push off and get us 2 cups of tea, lad, will you?" he said. one green with yak butter, and Mr. Vimes will have it boiled orange in a builder's boot with 2 sugars and yesterday's milk, right?" "That's how I like it," said Vimes weakly, sitting down. Sweeper took a deep, long breath. "And I like building gardens," he said. "Life should be a garden." Vimes stared blankly at what was in front of them. "Okay," he said. "The gravel and rocks, yes, I can see that. Shame about all the rubbish. It always turns up, doesn't it?" "Yes," said Lucy. "It's part of the pattern." "What? The old cigarette packet?" "Certainly. That invokes the element of air," said Sweeper. "And the cat doings?" "To remind us that disharmony, like a cat, gets everywhere." "The cabbage stalks? The used sonky?" Footnote 5. Named after Wallace Sonky, a man without whose experiments with thin rubber, the pressure on housing in Ankh-Morpork would have been a good deal more pressing. End footnote 5. At our peril, we forget the role of the organic in the total harmony. What arrives seemingly by chance in the pattern is part of a higher organization that we can only dimly comprehend. This is a very important fact, and has a bearing on your case." "And the beer bottle?" For the first time since Vimes had met him, the monk frowned. "You know, some bugger always tosses one over the wall on his way back from the pub on Friday nights. If it wasn't forbidden to do that kind of thing, he'd feel the flat of my hand, and no mistake." "It's not part of the higher organization." "Possibly. Who cares? That sort of thing gets on my thungus. It really does," said Sweeper. He sat back with his hands on his knees. Serenity flowed once more. "Well now, Mr. Vimes, you know the universe is made up of very small items." "Huh?" "We've got to work up to things gradually, Mr. Vimes. You're a bright man. I can't keep telling you everything is done by magic." "Am I really here too? In this city? I mean, a younger me?" "Of course. Why not? Where was I? Oh, yes. Made up of very small items, and this is not a good time to be in the watch. I remember. There's the curfew. And that was only the start." "Small items, Mr. Vimes," said Sweeper sharply. "You need to know this." "Oh, all right. How small?" "Very, very small. So tiny that they have some very strange ways indeed." Vimes sighed. "And I ask you, what ways are these, yeah?" "I'm glad you asked that question. For one thing, they can be in many places at once. Try to think, Mr. Vimes." Vimes tried to concentrate on what was probably the discarded fish and chip wrapper of infinity. Oddly enough, with so many horrible thoughts crowding his head, it was almost a relief to put them on one side in order to consider this. The brain did things like that. He remembered once when he'd been stabbed and would have bled to death if Sergeant Angua hadn't caught up with him, and how, as he lay there, he'd found himself taking a very intense interest in the pattern of the carpet. The senses say, we've only got a few minutes. Let's record everything, in every detail. "That can't be right," he said. "If this seat is made up of lots of tiny things that can be in lots of places at once, why is it standing still?" Give the man a small cigar, said Sweeper jubilantly. That's the big problem, Mr. Vimes. And the answer, our abbot tells us, is that it is in lots of places at once. Here's the tea. And in order for it to be in lots of places at once, the multiverse is made up of a vast number of alternative universes, an oodleplex of oodleplexes. That's like the biggest number anyone can think of ever, just so's it can accommodate all the quantum. Am I going too fast for you? Oh, that, said Vimes. I know about that. Like you make a decision in this universe, and you made a different decision in another one. I heard the wizards talking about that at a posh reception once. They were arguing about the glorious 25th of May. And what were they saying? Oh, all the old stuff. That it would have turned out different if the rebels had properly guarded the gates and the bridges. That you can't break a siege by a frontal attack. But they were saying that, in a way, everything happens somewhere. And you believe them? It sounds like complete thungus. But sometimes you can't help wondering, what would have happened if I'd done something different? Like when you killed your wife. Sweeper was impressed at Vimes' lack of reaction. This is a test, right? You're a quick study, Mr. Vimes. But in some other universe, believe me, I hauled off and punched you one. Again, Sweeper smiled the annoying little smile that suggested he didn't believe him. You haven't killed your wife, he said. Anywhere. This is nowhere. However huge the multiverse is, where Sam Vimes, as he is now, has murdered Lady Sybil. But the theory is quite clear. It says that if anything could happen without breaking any physical laws, it must happen. But it hasn't, and yet the many universes theory works. Without it, no one would ever be able to make a decision at all. So what people do matters, said Sweeper. People invent other laws. What they do is important. The abbot's very excited about this. He nearly swallowed his rusk. It means the multiverse isn't infinite, and people's choices are far more vital than they think. They can, by what they do, change the universe. Sweeper gave Vimes a long look. Mr. Vimes, you're thinking, I'm back in time, and damn me, I'm probably going to end up being the sergeant that teaches me all I know, right? I've been wondering. The watch would offer any gutter trash a job in those days, because of the curfew and all the spying. But look, I remember Keel. And, yes, he did have a scar and an eye patch, but I'm sure as hell that he wasn't me. Right. The universe doesn't work like that. You were indeed taken under the wing of one John Keel, a watchman from Sodopolis who came to Ankh-Morpork because the pay was better. He was a real person. He was not you. But do you remember if he ever mentioned to you that he was attacked by two men not long after he got off the coach? Hell yes, said Vimes. The muggers. He got his scar that way. A good old Ankh-Morpork welcome. But he was a tough man. Took him both down, no problem. This time there were three, said Sweeper. Well, three's trickier, of course, but you're the policeman. You guess the name of the third man, Mr. Vimes. Vimes hardly had to think. The answer erupted from the depths of darkest suspicion. Carcer? He soon settled in, yes. The bastard was in the next cell. He even told me he'd grabbed some money. And you're both stuck here, Mr. Vimes. This isn't your past anymore. Not exactly. It's a past. And up there is a future. It might be your future, it might not be. You want to go home now, leaving Carcer here and the real John Keel dead? But there'll be no home to go to if you could do that, because young Sam Vimes wouldn't get a swift course in basic policing from a decent man if you did. He'll learn it from people like Sergeant Knock and Corporal Quirk and Lance Corporal Cullen. And that might not be the worst of it by a long way. Vimes shut his eyes. He remembered how wet behind the ears he'd been. And Fred. Well, Fred Cullen hadn't been too bad. Under the half-hearted timorousness and lack of imagination, but Quirk had been an evil little sort in his way, and as for Knock, well, Knock had been Fred's teacher, and the pupil wasn't a patch on the master. What had Sam Vimes learned from Keel? To stay alert, to think for himself, to keep a place in his head free from the Quirks and the Knocks of the world, and not to hesitate about fighting dirty today if that was what it took to fight again tomorrow. He'd often thought he'd have been dead long ago if it wasn't for... He looked up sharply at the monk. "Can't tell you that, Mr. Vimes," said Lu Tzi. "Nothing certain, 'cause of quantum. But, look, I know my future happened, because I was there. No, what we've got here, friend, is quantum interference. Mean anything? No? Well, let me put it this way. There's one past and one future, but there are two presents. One where you and your evil friend turned up, and one where you didn't. We can keep these two presents going side by side for a few days. It takes a lot of run time, but we can do it. And then they'll snap back together. The future that happens depends on you. We want the future where Vimes is a good copper, not the other one." "But it must have happened," snapped Vimes. "I told you! I can remember it! I was there yesterday!" "Nice try, but that doesn't mean anything anymore," said the monk. "Trust me. Yes, it's happened to you, but even though it has, it might not, 'cause of quantum. Right now, there isn't a Commander Vimes-shaped hole in the future to drop you into. It's officially uncertain. But might not be if you do it right. You owe it to yourself, Commander. Right now, out there, Sam Vimes is learning to be a very bad copper indeed, and he learns fast." The little monk stood up. "I'll let you think about that," he said. Vimes nodded, staring at the gravel garden. Sweeper crept away quietly and went back into the temple. He walked to the other side of the office. He removed a strange-shaped key from around his neck and inserted it into a small door. The door opened. Brilliant sunlight burst ahead of him. He walked on, his sandals leaving the cold flagstones and walking on to well-trodden earth in broad, hot daylight. The river had a different course this far back in the past, and present-day residents of Ankh-Morpork would have been surprised at how pleasant it looked 700,000 years ago. Hippos sunbathed on a sandbank out in midstream and, according to Q, were getting troublesome lately. He'd had to set up a little temporal fence around the camp at nights so that any hippo trying to wander in among the tents found themselves back in the water with a headache. Q himself, his straw hat protecting his head from the hot sun, was supervising his assistants in a vined-off area. Lu Zi sighed as he walked towards it. There were going to be explosions. He knew it. It wasn't that he disliked Q, the Order's master of devices. The man was a sort of engineering equivalent of the abbot. The abbot had taken 1,000-year-old ideas and put them through his mind in a new way, and as a result, the multiverse had opened for him like a flower. Q, on the other hand, had taken the ancient technology of the procrastinators that could save and restore time and had harnessed it to practical everyday purposes, such as, yes, blowing people's heads off. It was something that Lu Zi tried to avoid. There were better things to do with people's heads. As Lu Zi approached, a line of joyful dancing monks wove their way along a bamboo replica of a street, letting off firecrackers and banging gongs. As they reached a corner, the last monk turned and lightly tossed a little drum into the outstretched arms of a straw dummy. The air shimmered, and the figure disappeared with a small thunderclap. "Nice to see something not blowing anyone's head off," said Lu Zi, leaning on the vine rope. "Oh, hello, sweeper," said Q. "Yes, I wonder what went wrong. You see, the body should have moved forward by a microsecond and left the head where it was." He picked up a megaphone. "Thank you, everyone. Places for another run. Soto, take over, please." He turned to Lu Zi. "Well?" "He's thinking about it," said Sweeper. "Oh, for heaven's sake, Lu Zi. This is completely unauthorized, you know. We're supposed to prune out rogue history loops, not expend vast amounts of time keeping them going. This one's important. We owe it to the man. It wasn't his fault we had the major temporal shattering just as he fell through the dome. Two timelines running side by side, moaned Q. That's quite unacceptable, you know. I'm having to use techniques that are completely untried. Yes, but it's only a few days. What about Vimes? Is he strong enough? He's got no training for this. He defaults to being a copper. A copper's a copper, wherever he is. I really don't know why I listen to you, Lucy. I really don't, said Q. He glanced at the arena and hurriedly raised his megaphone to his lips. Don't hold it that way up! I said don't hold! There was a thunderclap. Ba-bang! Lucy didn't bother to look around. Q lifted the megaphone again and said, warily, All right, someone please go and fetch Brother Kai, will you? Start looking around. Oh, 2 centuries ago. You don't even use these very useful devices I devise, he added to Lucy. Don't need to, said Lucy. Got a brain, anyway. I use the temporal toilet, don't I? A privy which discharges 10 million years into the past was not a good idea, Sweeper. I'm sorry I let you persuade me. It's saving us 4 pence a week to Harry King's Bucket Boys, Q. And that's not to be sneezed at. Is it not written, a penny saved is a penny earned? Besides, it all lands in a volcano anyway. Perfectly hygienic. There was another explosion. Q turned and raised his megaphone. "Do not bang the tambourine more than twice," he bellowed. "It's tap, tap, throw, duck. Please pay attention." He turned back to Sweeper. "4 more days at most, Lucy," he said. "I'm sorry, but after that I can't hide it in the paperwork. And I'll be amazed if your man can stand it. It'll affect his mind sooner or later, however tough you think he is. He's not in his right time." "We're learning a lot, though," Lucy insisted. "For a perfectly logical chain of reasons, Vimes ended up back in time, even looking rather like Keel. Eye patch and scar. Is that narrative causality, or historical imperative, or just plain weird? Are we back to the old theory of the self-correcting history? Is there no such thing as an accident, as the abbot says? Is every accident just a higher order design? I'd love to find out." 4 days, Q insisted. "Any longer than that, and this little exercise will show up and the abbot will be very, very annoyed with us." "Right you are, Q," said Sweeper meekly. "He'll be annoyed if he has to find out. Certainly," he thought as he walked back to the door in the air. He'd been very specific. The abbot of the history monks, the men in saffron, no such monastery. They had many names. Couldn't allow this sort of thing. And he'd taken pains to forbid Lucy from this course of action. He had added, "But when you do, I expect historical imperative will win." Sweeper went back to the garden and found Vimes still staring at the empty baked bean tin of universal oneness. "Well, Commander," he said. "Are you really like policemen for time?" said Vimes. "Well, in a way," said Sweeper. "So, you make sure the good stuff happens?" "No, not the good stuff. The right stuff," said Sweeper. "But, frankly, these days we have our work cut out making sure anything happens. We used to think time was like a river. You could row up and down and come back to the same place. Then we found it acted like a sea, so you could go from side to side as well. Then it turned out to be like a ball of water. You could go up and down too. Currently, we think it's like, lots of spaces all rolled up. And then there are time jumps and time slips, and humans mess it up too, wasting it and gaining it. And then there's quantum, of course." The monk sighed. "There's always bloody quantum. So what with one thing and another, we think we're doing well if yesterday happens before tomorrow, quite frankly. You, Mr. Vimes, got caught up in a bit of an event. We can't put it right. Not properly. You can." Vimes sat back. "I've got no choice, have I?" he said. "As my old sergeant used to say, you do the job that's in front of you." He hesitated. "And that's going to be me, isn't it? I taught me all I know." "No, I explained. I didn't understand it, but perhaps I don't have to." Sweeper sat down. Good. And now, Mr. Vimes, I'll take you back inside and I'll give you some background on the sergeant. And we'll work out what you need to know from all this. And we can set up a little loop so that you can tell yourself what you need to know. No addresses, though. And what will happen to me? Said Vimes. The me sitting here now. The other me walks away and me, this me, you understand? Well, what happens? Sweeper gave him a long, thoughtful look. You know, he said, it's very hard to talk quantum using a language originally designed to tell other monkeys where the ripe fruit is. Afterwards, well, there will be a you, as much you as you are now, so who can say it's not you? This meeting will be a sort of loop in time. In one sense, it will never end. In a way, it'll be like a dream, said Vimes warily. Sweeper brightened. Very good! Yes! Not true, but a very, very good lie. You know, you could have just told me everything, said Vimes. No, I wouldn't be able to tell you everything, and you, Mr. Vimes, aren't in the mood for games like that. This way, a man you trust, that's you, will tell you all the truth you need to know. Then we'll do a little of what the younger acolytes call slicing and gluing. And Mr. Vimes will go back to Treacle Mine Lane a little wiser. How are you going to get me back to the watch house? Don't even think about giving me some kind of potion. No, we'll blindfold you, twirl you around, take you the long way, and walk you back. I promise. Any other advice? Said Vimes gloomily. Just be yourself, said Sweeper. See it through. There'll come a time when you'll look back and see how it all made sense. Really. I wouldn't lie. It'll be a perfect moment. Believe me. But, Vimes hesitated. Yes? You must know there's another little problem if I'm going to be Sergeant Keel. I've remembered what day this is, and I know what's going to happen. Yes, said Sweeper. I know too. Shall we talk about that? Captain Tilden blinked. What happened there? He said. Where? Said Vimes, trying to fight down nausea. Time coming back had left him with a horrible sensation that he was really two people and neither of them was feeling at all well. You blurred, man. Perhaps I'm a bit tired of this, said Vimes, pulling himself together. Listen, Captain, I am John Keel. I can prove it, okay? Ask me some questions. You've got my papers there, haven't you? They were stolen. Tilden hesitated for a moment. He was a man whose mind was ponderous enough to have momentum. It was quite hard for his thoughts to change direction. Who is commander of the Sidopolis Watch, then? He said. Sheriff Macklewheat, said Vimes. Aha! Wrong! Fallen at the very first fence? What? In fact, you fool, it's Sheriff Purley. No! Excuse me, sir, said Snouty nervously. Yes, what? No, it is Macklewheat, sir. Purley died last week. Heard it in the pub. Fell into the river when drunk, said Vimes helpfully. That's what I heard. No, sir, said Snouty. Tilden looked furious. You could have known that. What? He said. It doesn't prove anything. Ask me something else then, said Vimes. Ask me what Macklewheat said about me. And I just hope I've got the answers right. Well, Said I was the best officer on his force, and he was sorry to see me go, said Vimes. Said I was of good character. Said he wished he could pay me the $25 a month I was going to get here. I never offered you. No, you offered me $20, and now that I've seen the mess here, I'm not taking it, Vimes rejoiced. Tilden hadn't even learned how to control a conversation. If you pay Nock $20, he owes you $19 change. The man couldn't talk and chew gum at the same time. And look at this, will you? Blug. Vimes dumped his handcuffs on the desk. The gaze of Snouty and Tilden swung to them as if magnetic. Oh dear, thought Vimes, and stood up and lifted the crossbow out of Snouty's hands. It was all in the movement. If you moved with authority, you got a second or two extra. Authority was everything. He fired the bow at the floor, thunk, then handed it back. A kid could open those cuffs, and while Snouty here keeps a very clean jail, he's completely drawers at being a guard, said Vimes. This place needs shaking up. He leaned forward, knuckles on the captain's desk, with his face a few inches from the trembling moustache and the milky eyes. $25 or I walk out that door, he said. It was probably a phrase never ever said before by any prisoner anywhere on the world. $25, murmured Tilden, hypnotized. And the rank will be sergeant at arms, said Vimes. Not sergeant. I'm not going to be given orders by the likes of Nock. Sergeant at arms, said Tilden distantly. But Vimes saw the hint of approval. It was a good military-sounding title, and it was still on the books. In fact, it was a pretty ancient pre-coppering term, back in the days when a court employed a big man with a stick to drag miscreants in front of it. Vimes had always admired the simplicity of that arrangement. Well, Sheriff McElweed, certainly gave you a most glowing reference, said the captain, shuffling his papers. Very glowing. Things have been a little difficult since we lost Sergeant. And I'll be paid my first month in advance, please. I need clothes and a decent meal and somewhere to sleep. Tilden cleared his throat. Many of the unmarried men stay in the barracks in Cheapside. Not me, said Vimes. I'll be lodging with Dr. Lorne in Twinkle Street. Well, Rosy Palm did suggest he had a spare room. The pox, no, doctor, said Snouty. Yeah, I'm particular about the company I keep, said Vimes. It's also just around the corner. He took his hands off the desk, stood back and wiped off a salute of almost parodic efficiency, the sort that Tilden had always loved. I'll report for duty at 3 o'clock this afternoon, sir, he said. Thank you, sir. Tilden sat mesmerized. It was $25, sir, I believe, said Vimes, still maintaining the salute. He watched the captain get up and go to the old green safe in the corner. The man was careful not to let Vimes see him turn the dial, but Vimes was pretty certain he didn't need to. The safe had still been there when he made captain, and by then everyone knew the combination was 4478, and that no one seemed to know how to change it. The only things worth keeping in it had been the tea and sugar, and anything you particularly wanted Nobby to read. Tilden came back with a small leather bag and slowly counted out the money, and was so cowed that he didn't ask Vimes to sign anything. Vimes took it, saluted again, and held out his other hand. Badge, sir, he said. Oh yes, of course. The captain, entirely unnerved, fumbled in the top drawer of the desk and pulled out a dull copper shield. If he'd been that observant, he'd have noticed how hungrily Vimes's eyes watched it. The new sergeant-at-arms picked up his badge with care and saluted yet again. "Oath, sir," he said. "Oh, that thing? I believe I've got it written down somewhere." Vimes took a deep breath. This probably wasn't a good idea, but he was flying now. "I, square bracket, recruit's name, square bracket, do solemnly swear by square bracket recruit's deity of choice, square bracket, to uphold the laws and ordinances of the city of Ankh-Morpork, serve the public trust, and defend the subjects of his stroke, her bracket, delete whichever is inappropriate, bracket, majesty, bracket name of reigning monarch, bracket, without fear, favour, or thought of personal safety, semicolon, to pursue evildoers and protect the innocent, laying down my life if necessary, in the course of said duty, so help me, bracket, aforesaid deity, bracket, full stop, God save the king, stroke, queen, bracket, delete whichever is inappropriate, bracket, full stop."
"My word! Well done," said Tilden. "You have come well prepared, Sergeant."
"And now it's the king's shilling, sir," said Vimes, insistently, soaring on the wings of audacity.
"What?"
"I have to take the king's shilling, sir."
Do we have a..."
"It's in the bottom drawer, sir," said Snouty helpfully. "On the bit of string."
"Oh, yes,"
said Tilden, beaming.
"It's a long time since we've used that. What?"
"Is it?" said Vimes. After some rummaging, Tilden produced the coin. It was a genuine old shilling, probably worth $50 now just for its silver, and thus, coppers being coppers, it had always been dropped into the new copper's hand and then tugged away before it was pinched. Vimes had taken the oath once. He wondered if taking it twice cancelled it out, but it needed to be done, and you had at least to touch the shilling. He felt the weight in his palm and took a small, shameful pleasure in closing his fingers on it before the captain had time to drag it back. Then, point made, he released the grip. With a final salute, he turned and tapped Snouty on the shoulder. "With the captain's permission, I'd like a chat with you outside, please." And Vimes strode out. Snouty looked at Tilden, who was still sitting as though hypnotized, the shilling dangling from his fist. The captain managed to say,
"Good man, that. Very good. Got backbone."
"No, I'll just go and see what he wants, sir," said Snouty, and scuttled out. He had reached the end of the corridor when a hand came out of the shadows and pulled him close. "You're a useful man to know, Snouty," hissed Vimes. "I can tell."
"Yes, sir,"
said Snouty, held half on tiptoe. "You've got your ear to the ground, eh?"
"Yes, sir."
"There's someone in every nick who knows all that's going on and can lay his hands on just about anything, Snouty. And I think you are that man."
"No, yes, sir."
"Then listen here," said Vimes. "Size 8 boots, size 7 1/4 helmet, a good leather cape. The boots should be a good make, but second hand. Got that?"
"Second hand?"
"Yes. Soles pretty nearly worn through."
"Soles pretty nearly worn through."
"No, check," said Snouty. "Breastplate, not to have any rust on it, but a few dents will be okay. A good sword, Snouty, and believe me, I know a good sword when I hold one. As for all the rest of the stuff, well, I know a man like you can get hold of the very best and have it delivered to Dr. Lawn's place in Twinkle Street by 10 this morning, and there'll be something in it for you, Snouty."
What'll that be, sir?"
said Snouty, who was finding the grip uncomfortable. "My undying friendship, Snouty," said Vimes, "which is going to be an extremely rare coin in these parts, let me tell you."
"Right you are, Sarge,"
said Snouty.
"And will you be wanting a bell, sir? A bell? For ringing and shouting, 'Hurrah! All's well!'
With Sarge." Vimes considered this. A bell. Well, every copper still got a bell. It was down there in the regulations, but Vimes had banned its use on anything but ceremonial occasions. "No bell for me, Snouty," said Vimes. "Do you think things are well?" Snouty swallowed.
"Could go either way, Sarge,"
he managed. "Good man. See you this afternoon." There was a glow of dawn in the sky when Vimes strode out, but the city was still a pattern of shadows. In his pocket was the reassuring heaviness of the badge, and in his mind the huge, huge freedom of the oath. Ruler after ruler had failed to notice what a devious oath it was. He walked as steadily as he could down to Twinkle Street. A couple of watchmen tried to waylay him, but he showed them the badge, and more importantly, he had the voice now. It had come back to him. It was night, and he was walking the streets, and he owned the damn streets, and somehow that came out in the way he spoke. They'd hurried off. He wasn't sure they'd believe him, but at least they'd pretended to. The voice had told them he could be the kind of trouble they weren't paid enough to deal with. At one point he had to step aside as a very thin horse dragged a huge and familiar four-wheeled wagon off the cobbles. Frightened faces looked out at him from between the wide metal strips that covered most of it, and then it disappeared into the gloom. Curfew was claiming its nightly harvest. These were not good times. Everyone knew Lord Winder was insane, and then some kid who was equally mad had tried to knock him off, and would have done too if the man hadn't moved at the wrong moment. His lordship had taken the arrow in the arm, and they said, they being the nameless people of the kind that everyone met in the pub, that the wound had poisoned him and made him worse. He suspected everyone and everything. He saw dark assassins in every corner. The rumor was that he woke up sweating every night because they even got into his dreams. And he saw plots and spies everywhere throughout his waking hours, and had men root them out. And the thing about rooting out plots and spies everywhere is that even if there are no real plots to begin with, there are plots and spies galore very soon. At least the Night Watch didn't have to do much of the actual rooting. They just arrested the pieces. It was the special office in Cable Street that was the long hand of his lordship's paranoia. The particulars, they were officially, but as far as Vimes could remember, they'd revelled in their nickname of the quote-unquote unmentionables. They were the ones that listened in every shadow and watched at every window. That was how it seemed, anyway. They certainly were the ones who knocked on doors in the middle of the night. Vimes stopped in the dark. The cheap clothes were soaked through, the boots were flooded, rain was trickling off his chin, and he was a long, long way from home. Yet, in a treacherous kind of way, this was home. He'd spent most of his days working nights. Walking through the wet streets of a sleeping city was his life. The nature of the night changed, but the nature of the beast remained the same. He reached into the ragged pocket and touched the badge again. In the darkness, where lamps were few and far between, Vimes knocked on a door. A light was burning in one of the lower windows, so Lorne was presumably still awake. After a while, a very small panel slid back, and he heard a voice say, "Oh, it's you!" There was a pause, followed by the sound of bolts being released. Click, click, click. The doctor opened the door. In one hand, he held a very long syringe. Vimes found his gaze inexorably drawn to it. A bead of something purple dripped off the end and splashed onto the floor. "What would you have done? Injected me to death?" he said. "This?" Lon looked at the instrument as if unaware that he'd been holding it. "Oh, just sorting out a little problem for someone. Patients turn up at all hours." "I'll bet they do." Rosie said you had a spare room," said Vimes. "I can pay," he added quickly. "I've got a job, $5 a month. I won't be needing it for long." "Upstairs, on the left," said Lon, nodding. "We can talk about it in the morning." "I'm not a criminal madman," said Vimes. He wondered why he said it, and then wondered who he was trying to reassure. "Never mind. You'll soon fit in," said Lon. There was a whimper from the door leading to the surgery. "The bed's not aired, but I doubt that you'll care," he said. "And now, if you'll excuse me." It wasn't aired, and Vimes didn't care. He didn't even remember getting into it. He woke up once, in panic, and heard the sound of the big black wagon rattling down the street. And then it just, quite seamlessly, became part of the nightmare.